Yo, what is up, everybody? It is me, your boy TPT, coming at you not live and not from Twitch TV. Now, before we get into the video, I do just have to give a quick shout out to the EU for Casuals Discord, because despite the fact that Zarjan cucked me and said that I can't add everyone anymore, I'll still stick to my side of the deal. So be sure to check it out, link in the description down below. It's a great place to hang out, and especially if you are new at EU4, they host regular EU4 games, and as long as you avoid the politics channel, I think it'll turn out just fine. Now, anyway, into more important stuff. Today is going to be, I would say this is probably going to be one of my more polarizing videos, that being ideas. Now, specifically, we're going to be talking about single player ideas. Multiplayer ideas I'll probably do in the next video, but I want to specifically talk about single player ideas, as there's a very different meta shift when compared to multiplayer. I think there is definitely a lot of big differences in here. So, as you know, you get ideas every couple of admin texts. You get 7 little bonuses, and then you get an extra additional bonus when you complete the idea called I sort of call it an ambition, because of how it similarly works with the national ideas, but I know that's not actually the term for it. I just like to call it that anyway, because people tend to know what you're talking about. Anyway, on top of that, you also have what's called policies, which is where when you combine 2 ideas together, you unlock the ability to get a unique policy, and you can equip up to 1 of each of these policies by base for free every single month. And depending on the category of the policy, you can also spend an additional 1 admin, diplo, or mill point to run extra policies on top of that. So, now we get into the very polarizing part, which is which ideas are considered great. So, I'm probably going to do this through Monarch points, because I was going to make a tier list, but I figured that might cause a little too many arguments, so I figure if I just do it through, each individual idea, as well as talking about their combinations, their policies, and their different varying usages, I would be able to, sort of cause a little less potential anger in the comments down below. So, the first one we have is innovative ideas. Now, unfortunately, as of the Emperor patch, innovative has taken quite a significant nerf. This is because of the fact that, as you can see, you've got the modern firearm techniques with quality ideas, which gives 10% infantry combat ability. That did used to give 20% infantry combat ability. They then nerfed it down to 5 before realizing that that was too hard of a nerf and putting it up to 10. So this policy is very, very powerful still. Nowhere near as good as it was. I would say it's definitely a mid to high tier though, particularly because of the fact that obviously it is a military policy. It does also have a couple, other minor ones of note, like the offensive ideas for the leader and siege ability. But realistically, not too many of its policies are too well known. Or like you have the aristocratic one, which is 20% production efficiency, but aristocratic is not a heavily used idea group, but obviously we'll cover that when we get to it. So overall, this idea group, normally when you tend to take it, you'll be in somewhere in Europe, or potentially places like Korea, Ethiopia, and Japan, where you have, you're able to make large sums of money and thus afford to be able to dev institutions and remain ahead of time. As there's 2 parts of this, of the ideas themselves, which are really good, which is the technology cost and the innovativeness gain. The technology cost is really huge, and it's the big reason why taking this idea early on is the meta, because of the fact that obviously the more techs you have preceding taking this idea group, the better the advantages get, with 60 points per individual tech or 180 points per 3 technologies, obviously, because you've got your admin, your diplo, and your mill. And over the course of the game, the policy can save you up to about 3,000 points for only essentially a 1,200 admin point idea. Because if you don't know, base cost for these is 400 points each. However, because of the innovativeness gain, it would actually probably be less than that. Anyway, the other point is the innovativeness gain. Now, if you guys don't know what innovativeness is essentially something you can accrue both passively and actively. You accrue it actively by taking techs at a time before anyone else does, as you can see, because no one has taken tech 4 yet. If we were to take it right now, so let's just say we give ourselves 1,000 ad points. If we were to take it right now, we would gain a full 2 innovativeness, and obviously with the innovativeness ideas, we would gain 3 innovativeness. And this can also stack with the Anglican modifier, for example, which gives, if I recall correctly, an additional 25% innovativeness. So you would be getting, an additional 75 in total, which is really good. Now, innovativeness gives up to 10% power cost, as well as, I believe it's 0.5 yearly army and naval attrition decay. So the main reason, obviously, though, that everyone takes it is the all power cost. That affects absolutely everything: stability, war exhaustion, taking technologies, taking ideas, just absolutely everything. Particularly when you stack it with something like the, your golden era, you can get up to 20% power cost if you've got high innovativeness in the late game. And that is very, very potent and can really help you blaze through ideas early on. Later on. Apologies. But yeah, so it's definitely very nice for those particular things, as well as combining nicely to get some very potent policies, especially with the leader siege. Leader siege is very difficult to get, and siege ability, whilst it's not as difficult to get now that we have got the professionalism, which does also give siege ability, its siege ability is still definitely something you can stack nicely. As defensive as obviously the sorry if you can hear that, but essentially the defensiveness can be stacked a lot easier. So siege ability is definitely really important comparatively, because you can't get as much of it, and so when you do get it, it does mean a lot more. Now, next idea group is religious ideas. Okay, so I tend to put religious ideas hand in hand with humanist ideas. The reason for this is because of the fact that religious is good for forcefully converting, as well as the Deus Vult perk, which I'll explain in a second. Whereas humanist is much better for accepting those ideas, and allowing. Essentially, it's more of a progressive sort of idea group, whereas religious is a very conservative sort of thing. Where religious, you got to stick to your own religion. Humanist, you can be a lot more accepting. You can you get tolerance of heretics, heathens, etc. But I'll cover humanist in a second. Now, religious doesn't really have any particularly good idea groups, as you can see here. It doesn't have it does have the 10% siege ability with quality ideas, which is quite nice. But other than that, it's a little bit meh. You can get some decent ones like the trade, for the extra missionary strength and goods produced. If you don't know, goods produced is one of, if not the most individual, single, powerful economic modifier in the game. So especially in the later game, when you start getting coal and furnaces, it can really just push your economy through the roofs. Now, speaking of economy, nearly forgot. The main reason that you take Deus Vult is, that you take religious ideas is 1, Deus Vult, and 2, for the missionary strength. So Deus Vult essentially gives you a claim on every single heretic and heathen bordering you. So if you're Orthodox, most of the world is going to be a heretic or a heathen for you. And so it essentially basically just gives you free unlimited CBs on your neighbors, including 100% cost for taking provinces. So whilst you would have to pay the extra 10% that you would otherwise save from getting a claim, you don't have to pay diplomatic power from taking provinces directly off of the enemy war leader when you're using that idea. So it's very, very good. It's basically almost like an early game imperialism CB, except they have to be adjacent to, and they have to be a heathen or a heretic. Now, the other important reason is missionary strength. Obviously, that's pretty self-explanatory. It's just to help you convert things easier. Now, if you were to take it on a country like Muscovy or other countries, I would never suggest taking religious first, because of the fact that most religions, you won't be able to convert them with just the 3% missionary strength. It's better to wait till later, till you get some of the other bonuses in your national decisions, like that one. And also you get some other plus 1% as you go through your admin text. So I would never recommend getting it first. However, it can be quite good, particularly especially if you're doing something like a one faith world conquest, which if you don't know is when you conquer the whole world and make it all your religion. Now, next one is economic ideas. So this one it's pretty self-explanatory. Basically gives you a fat stack of cash, more or less. Important ones to note are the inflation reduction, the production efficiency, the autonomy reduction, and the 20% dev cost, as well as some very, very nice policies, that being the 10% artillery combat ability and the 5% discipline when combined with quality. The 5% discipline and quality policy is probably one of the best in the game, so I would always try and recommend to take economic as well as quality, because it really does just push your troops to that next level. We will probably be covering this idea a bit more in multiplayer, but yeah, more or less just understand it's a great way of making money if you don't make a lot of money from trade. And it can really push, it's really good at pushing your military to the next level. So, next one is expansion ideas. So, expansion ideas are designed, normally they tend to be used in tandem with either exploration ideas, or if you're starting, say, as Mali. No, I think it's, yeah. So, say you're starting as Mali, you don't necessarily need exploration ideas. You don't always need it. However, you know, say you want to colonize these provinces, or you want to like colonize this province to get to Morocco. Well, all you have to do is just put 400 admin points into expansion, and you can grab the colonists, and you can either obviously fill it out, or realistically, you can just drop expansion and replace it for a different idea group like economic. So, the other reason it's put in tandem with exploration is because of the fact that obviously in combination they give +3 colonists, because unfortunately they moved the colonists from exploration over to expansion. I think it's the second one, if I recall correctly. I think this one used to just be settler chance. However, they moved it over from exploration to expansion in order to encourage people to take expansion more. The other good part about expansion is obviously the negative 10% minimum autonomy in territories. That can be very useful. If you're looking at the potential for trade companies, although realistically you do tend to want to build states, but if you don't really have a lot of a lot of admin capacity room, then, and you want to just like take a lot of states, a lot of territories, then this is definitely the option for you. It doesn't have too interesting policies. Most of them, like the exploration, the quantity, they're all just really focused around giving you extra global settler increase, which obviously just helps your colonies to grow. Now, administrative ideas, okay? Administrative ideas is a I would say it's quite a subjective one. You can take it on large countries, specifically because the negative 25% core creation cost is really, 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 really good. But the problem is that the rest of the idea group, except for the governing capacity, is really not that great. You know, you've really got the governing capacity, and the core creation cost is honestly the only real redeeming factors. Or if you're playing possibly somewhere like Switzerland, in which case the mercenary benefits do come in handy. As you can see, once again, with the exception of trade, it doesn't really tend to have too good of a policies, in my opinion. But this is pretty much a mandatory idea group when you're going for a world conquest. It is more or less mandatory. So if you do plan on doing that, you're pretty much forced into taking administrative ideas. Now, next one we have is humanist, and whilst this is a bit of a subjective one, depending upon where you're starting, I am personally a massive fan of the humanist ideas, particularly when combined with something like offensive. That's because humanist is all about decreasing rebels. And frankly, when I see it as decreasing rebels, that I also see that as increasing your expansion speed. So you've got the 25% religious unity, -2 national unrest, which is really nice, +2 tolerance of heretics, pretty solid, -10 years of separatism, which is beautiful, as well as maximum road cultures, improved relations, +2 tolerance of heathens, which again, very nice, and -10 idea cost, and +10% demi loyalty guerrilla room. The -10% idea cost, again, also means that if you want to take it a bit earlier, it isn't necessarily a bad idea. Quite honestly, when I'm playing in India, in both multiplayer and single player, I always lead with either humanist, quantity, and trade, and then take the other two second and third, because it really allows you to just explode in dev as long as as long as you're not worrying too hard about aggressive expansion. Like in India, you can pretty much just blow up with little care for aggressive expansion. As well as it, combined with the Indian Sultanate, it really means that you basically permanently have +3 tolerance of heretics as someone like Bengal. And, that doesn't just help you for expanding in India, it helps you expand beyond that point as well. Plus, Humanist Ideas also has one of, in my opinion, the best non-military policies in the game, which is -1 years -1 national unrest and -5 years of separatism with offensive ideas. So combined with humanist, that gives you -15 years of separatism. So basically, when you conquer a province, you'll start with +15 unrest, and that goes away by 0.5 yearly. Essentially, what humanist and offensive does is it just halves that. So it's also, again, really good on world conquest. Particularly, I always recommend taking humanist offensive on the Ottomans, because they don't really need the troop count nor the troop quality, and they do also have to tend to expand a lot more early. And so humanist and offensive are really good on them. So it's definitely an idea to look out for. Again, it can be a little subjective. I would never take religious and humanist. I would pick one and stick with it. But obviously that depends upon your situation, depends on what sort of nation you're playing as, and depends on what you are planning to do. But it's another very important one for world conquests. Not as mandatory in non-world conquests games, but I still do really love it in single player. It's just such a very nice quality of life, honestly. And, not just quality of life, it does obviously have objective benefits as well. Okay. Espionage ideas. Frankly, most of the time, espionage ideas is hot garbage. Just useless. Honestly, it's really just not very good. Now, there's two main situations where I would say it can be subjectively good. The first one is, if we go back to one of the hordes, the first one is, if you don't know, hordes are very focused around cavalry combat ability and cavalry, using cavalry to their advantages. They're very heavily focused on it. Now, what espionage ideas is, if you combine it with aristocratic ideas, it does give plus 10% cavalry combat ability. That is pretty much one of the only times I would really recommend taking this idea. The second one is, it's a little bit subjective. Some people like Flow Warrior agree with me on this. Some people staunchly disagree. Personally, I don't really think I like it, but it's an option, is taking it in the Holy Roman Empire, because if you don't know, they increased the base cost of a spy network fabricating a claim on a country in the Holy Roman Empire by 50%. So instead of only costing 20 spy network, it costs 30. As well as that, obviously, it does have the negative 20% aggressive expansion pack, which is quite significant. And probably it's probably one of the objectively good parts of the idea group, but obviously it's the fourth one, so a lot of people don't tend to go for it. But it also can be very fun as an air quotes meme idea in multiplayer, as it can really let you screw with people. Particularly when you start combining it with the rebel support efficiency from something like economic, it can just get so unbelievably annoying. Also humanist as well. Sorry, humanist in economic gives plus 75% rebel support efficiency, and it's great for peeing off players. So if you're a bit of a troll, I would always recommend taking espionage ideas. Just keep in mind that your armies will probably get stomped if you're not careful. So make sure they're not too aware that it's you doing it. Now, next one we've got is diplomatic ideas. Personally, in single player, I think diplomatic ideas are actually pretty useful. This is because of the fact that, it lets you really, like, particularly the province war score cost, the diplomats, the diplomatic relations lets you have more vassals. It lets you fabricate more claims. It's really great for blobbing out, particularly if you combine it with something as like playing as Austria, because obviously, it's HAB. If you don't know, Austria is a very diplomatically focused country, and you can get like +2 diplomatic reputation. I think it's also in absolutism. You can get +3, or no, I think it's Reformation. You get +3 diplomatic reputation. So if you combine that with the +2 from getting diplomat ideas, you can just have I think you can probably pretty comfortably get up to around +10. And obviously that just means you integrate vassals so unbelievably quickly that you can really start to blob out. However, again, you've got to consider the fact that it's really for those with an aggressive vassal playstyle. It does lose a lot of its efficiency on those who don't play heavily with vassals, which honestly I would recommend playing with vassals. They're so good, particularly with the governing capacity changes. They basically have become mandatory. So it's definitely I would say it's a pretty high tier idea group. And it does let you to expand quite well. Plus, it does have some okay policies, although naturally pretty much all of those are related to diplomatic, like extra diplomats, diplomatic reputation, relations, plus it's got like quantity with the extra land force limit and, for keeping your vassals loyal and stuff like that. Now, trade ideas. Pretty much the only real way I can sum up trade ideas is, do you want money? Do you need money? Do you like money? Then take trade ideas. I would never recommend taking it first though. I would always recommend taking it around second or third, because it's not really, you do want to like power up your army somewhat or increase the size of it at least before you do end up taking trade ideas. However, it's also got some really good policies, as you can see here with you got the 20% trade efficiency in both admin and quality ideas, and obviously quality ideas are one you're going to be taking pretty often. Plus, you've got probably one of my favorite economic policies in the game, 20% goods produced modifier with quantity ideas, which we'll be covering in a second, but quantity ideas are very, very good in single player. And so you can often pick up the policy. And as I stated earlier, goods produced modifier is probably the best economic modifier in the game. And that is one of the highest ways of getting goods produced. I don't think I've ever seen a single modifier that gives a permanent boost of more than 20%. So it's very sexy, super good at making money. But again, you got to consider that it's not good for your army. It is purely if you need the cash. And you do tend to have a decent trade node as well. So if you're something like England, take trade ideas. Netherlands, take trade ideas. But if you're something like Ethiopia, I might think twice about it, just depending upon how early in the game you are, if you've secured Alexandria or not, etc., etc. Now, next idea is exploration. Exploration's pretty simple. Are you Portugal? Are you England in like your third idea group? Are you Castile? Well, if you answered yes to any of these questions above, you probably want to be taking this idea group. That is because it gives you the ability to recruit explorers and conquistadors, which lets you go to the new world, and obviously also gives you a colonist as well. I would pretty much say that if you're Portugal, it's basically first lock in every time exploration ideas. If you're Castile, depending on how you want to go about it, how quickly you want to get the Portuguese Union, you can take it first, or if you want to, have a bit more of a mainland presence, I would recommend taking it possibly second or third, and going for something like quality or quantity instead. And also as England, because the fact that England doesn't have the trade wins that Portugal get, if we look here, Portugal get these, which essentially makes it easier to get over to the new world. It artificially increases your colonial range, whereas obviously England gets artificially decreased colonial range. Unless you have Iceland already, you normally don't want to be taking it till around the third idea group. But if you do secure Iceland, you can normally reach over here by Tech 7, whereas normally you'd be taking it somewhere at Tech 10 instead if you haven't managed to grab these provinces yet. Same with Ireland. So I would always suggest, also if you want to play as like a colonial Japan, that's okay. I wouldn't tend to recommend taking it over in the Spice Islands. I would tend to go for expansion, and then go for something more militaristic. But you can take it there as well. Again, also in Africa, probably don't need it. I would probably once again go for expansion of exploration, but it does also depend on how quickly you expand and how quickly the fog of war disappears. So, the next idea is maritime ideas. Now, maritime ideas isn't the greatest idea, but That being said, it's still better than espionage. So, maritime is essentially, it's focused around your navy, but unlike naval ideas, it's not purely the military benefits of your navy. It gives you a larger navy, it gives you a cheaper navy, it does give you somewhat of a better navy, but it also makes you better for like protecting trade and stuff. It also gives you more sailors and more naval force limits. So if you're planning on playing a trade-heavy game as someone like Portugal or England, honestly, naval ideas is genuinely not the worst idea you can take. It's not the best. Again, it doesn't increase the size of your army or anything, which is obviously a very big priority normally. But it does still give you some very nice modifiers to your ships. Like I said, like it makes them cheaper, gives you an extra admiral, leader without upkeep, so you can actually use it on a general as well. It doesn't have to be an admiral. Also gives you 50% force limit, 50% sailors, makes your ships cheaper. Also, a nice little benefit is when the ships are in a coastal sea zone, they can actually repair, so you don't need to put your ships in to repair them, although they obviously do repair slower than if they were in a port. But overall, it's frankly not a horrible idea group. It's just that there do tend to be better options. So it's very situational to very, very naval-heavy nations like England, Portugal, and, maybe Malacca. I do sometimes take it on Malacca as well. Well, quite often, realistically. Next idea group is influence. So influence ideas is another very, very good one for those vassal lovers, as it gives, it gives negative liberty desire in subjects. It gives diplomatic annexation costs 25%, which is really big, as well as diplomatic relations, diplomatic reputation, vassal force limit, contribution, and a lot of other nice little bonuses. So it's actually a really good one when you're going for that world conquest. I believe it is the meta as the fourth idea or the third, because the fact that it just lets you deal with vassals so much easier, and it really, makes them loyal. So it's definitely not a bad pickup, particularly in World Conquest, or again, if you're a vassal lover, which once again, I would recommend that you should be, or at least learn it to an extent. Plus, again, if you're playing something like Austria, I realize I'm saying again, guys, too much. I'm sorry, but you're going to have to deal with it. Yeah, if you're playing something like Austria, it is pretty much another mandatory pickup as well. It's great for the HRE. Now, aristocratic ideas. Pretty much the only time you want to be taking aristocratic ideas is if you are Poland or the Horde. And that is because of the aforementioned cavalry combat ability that I mentioned. If you want to go, full Winged Hussars Commonwealth, or you want to play a Horde, then you need to take aristocratic ideas. If you do not fit under one of the two aforementioned categories, don't even bother. It's just not worth it. It's not a very good idea group unless it's specifically for the cavalry and the noble knights ability. Now, before we forget, we have got the other alternative for it, which is plutocratic. If you don't know, aristocratic is for like kingdoms and hordes and that, whereas plutocratic is for republics. It's pretty good for Switzerland, but again, it's really not that great. It's just sort of a master of everything. It gives you unrest, which is nice, gives you goods produced, which as I mentioned is really nice. But overall, it's just kind of meh. It's a jack of all trades, when realistically, when it comes to ideas, you're not really looking for a jack of all trades. You're looking for either like a full economic or a full military idea group. And it does have some okay policies, like the yearly Republican tradition is actually really, really good because of, re-electing your leaders, as well as the religious ideas can be pretty good, but, for the times of heretics. But overall, frankly, it's just not a great idea group, and I would pretty much recommend don't take it. It's just not good. I'm not going to stop you, but it's not great. Offensive ideas, okay. So offensive ideas give you shock, they give you fire, they give you lots of siege ability, and they give you discipline. This is pretty much mandatory playing as the Ottomans. I would actually take this like pretty much first, sometimes second, like with humanist, particularly for that policy. That humanist policy is so unbelievably good. And it makes your generals just so much better overall. you know, and as well as giving you the discipline. Again, the siege limit is really good. 20% siege limit is one of the biggest modifiers of that in the game. So I would pretty much always recommend taking it. If you're not playing as the Ottomans though, or a similar nation, I would recommend saving it for later. Because while it's good in the late game with the generals, it's better to take something like quality, defensive, or quantity in the earlier game. Again, does have some okay policies, as you can see here. Particularly the humanist is probably my favorite one. There's nothing else too really significant. Other than the trade ideas, the movement speed can be quite interesting. If you don't watch a rumba, you wouldn't understand why. But basically, it's because of the fact that the AI doesn't tend to take into account movement speed bonuses that the player has, and so you can actually be able to outmaneuver the AI quite easily when you have those sort of bonuses. Now, next idea group is defensive. So, defensive is another sort of polarizing idea group. Personally, I really don't like it, okay? It is not a bad idea group at all. I just don't like taking it because it's very early focused. Specifically because of the morale. If you know what you take defensive, you take it for two main reasons. One, you want the early power spike of morale, because if you don't know, morale early game is king. Discipline in that takes over later, you know, in the later game, but morale is king in early game. So if you need an early power spike, go for defensive ideas. It is just really, really nice. It's just that I don't tend to play around the early game too hard, to my detriment sometimes, but I just don't really like this idea group. It's not bad. Once again, cannot stress enough, it is not a bad idea group. It is actually a pretty decent one, even after the big nerf of losing the army tradition, but I just don't personally like it. Now, the other advantage of taking it is obviously for the forts. If you look, there's a bunch of fort modifiers here, and it's really good for stacking with other defensive bonuses. So if you're playing something like Switzerland with a lot of mountain forts, or Persia with a lot of mountain forts, it's not a bad idea to take it. It can really mess with the AI because they're not good at dealing with mountain forts. And obviously when you attack them on mountain forts, you can do a lot more damage than you take. So it can definitely have its advantages against the AI. And it can, you know, we'll cover it a bit more in multiplayer because it does have much more of a use in multiplayer, but obviously we're not going to be covering that in this video. So the next idea is quality ideas. So quality ideas is probably one of the best idea groups in the game and one of my personal favorites. This is because it gives you infantry combat ability, cavalry combat ability, artillery combat ability, discipline, army tradition, and also has some very sexy policies as well. So with quality ideas, it makes your troops better. It just makes them so much better than non-quality idea groups. It can pretty much make up a difference between an idea group like Ethiopia and almost like an idea group like Miwa, you know, where Miwa is pretty much mini Prussia and Ethiopia is just hot garbage. If you give an Ethiopia full quality ideas versus a Miwa, there's actually a pretty, you know, a Miwa without quality ideas, chances are the Ethiopia will actually probably win, provided they're on even terms, obviously. Because it just gives so many positive modifiers to your army that it's pretty much never worth not taking at some point in the game. Now, it is also worth noting, obviously, that it does give a couple bonuses to your ships as well, including a little bit of morale of navies. Now, if you don't know, because of how the naval disengagement works, pretty much morale of navies matters more than any other component of naval warfare. Because you don't have discipline in the Navy. You don't have, well, let me correct that. You don't have the modifier discipline in the Navy, should I say. And morale is just completely king there because ships will disengage when they're on low morale and they still take shots, but they don't actually shoot themselves. So if you have a big naval advantage, you will wreck somebody pretty comfortably. You know, if you put someone on even footing, if you give someone 10%, you know, like 10% morale navies versus like, you know, like, 10% light ship damage, the morale navies will win. It is just so much better. and you can't go wrong with it. So not only does it make your troops infinitely better, but it's a nice bonus to your ships as well if you do have any. Even if you don't have a navy, it's still worth taking. Plus, it does give, you know, the innovative idea group 10% ICA, as well as the 20% trade efficiency from trade ideas, and the biggest one, which is the 5% discipline from economic. That is, again, like I said, one of the best military policies in the game, and I would always recommend picking it up. Quantity. Quantity is I would say pretty much everyone agree on this. Quantity is an S tier idea group in single player because of the fact that the AI really isn't good at judging the strength of armies in relation to the numbers. So it doesn't matter if the AI would actually beat you because of their higher discipline or ICA. If you outnumber them, the chances are there's a pretty good shot that they won't even attack you in the first place because of the fact that you have so many troops, because they heavily overweigh the number of troops versus the quality of those troops. So that's why not countries like Russia are really good in single player, because the fact that they can just puke out troops and there's not much that the AI can really do to respond. You've got the three important ones are the 50% national manpower modifier, which literally just basically doubles your max manpower, 20% manpower recovery speed, which is really nice, and the 50% land force limit modifier, which is huge. Basically means you can recruit 50 extra troops before going over your force limit, which is very important in the single player game. And it also lets you fight multi-front wars much easier, because again, you've got 50% extra troops and you've got a lot more reserve manpower as well, so you can afford to be fighting more wars at once much easier. So this is pretty much a guaranteed pickup on every single country. You don't have to take it straight away like the Ottomans. I would recommend taking offensive first. But if you're playing as Brandenburg, Poland, Muscovy, Castile, England, Mamluks, Timurids, just anything really, you can take quantity ideas. It's not going to hurt you, and it will probably work out in your favor. Additionally, it does have some decent policies, particularly the economic gives another 10% dev cost, which is very nice. You can also get fort maintenance, garrison size, and the 20% goods produced with trade ideas, which again, as I mentioned, my favorite. So it can give you some decent money as well if you combine it with trade ideas. Last but not least, naval ideas. Are you Great Britain? Are you Japan? Is the answer yes? Still don't take this idea group. It's hot garbage in single player. You don't need it. If you could take naval ideas in single player, you should be taking maritime ideas. This group just is not worth it. It's hot garbage, and the Marines aren't worth it. You do obviously get some pretty nice things, but it's only 10% morale of navies. Guess how much you get 10% from? Oh, quality ideas. It's just not worth it. Never take it. Too expensive. If you're going to take naval ideas, think twice. Take quantity instead. If you're going to take naval ideas, think twice, take quality instead. Just don't take this idea group in single player. It is not worth it under any circumstances. It is the worst idea group in single player. Now, my opinion on that may change in multiplayer. Very, very circumstantially still. But in single player, it is just nothing but hot garbage. And you should know that fact. It's just not worth it. Ever. Ever. You can take maritime ideas in single player. I won't judge you too harshly for it if you're playing the right country, but never take naval ideas. I can't stress that enough. So, now that I've covered every idea group, I will be probably just wrapping it up here. So keep in mind, again, I would say just the important ones to note are quantity, quality, defensive, depending, trade, diplomatic, influence, economic, religious, and humanist. Those are probably the things that I know, as well as innovativeness subjectively. But those are probably the idea groups that I tend to hover around a lot. So I would always recommend taking a look at them. And anyway, guys, I'm going to finish up here. I hope you have enjoyed. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. If you haven't checked out my Twitch channel, please do be sure to. I'll put a link to the description to it down below. Twitch.tv/TwinsPlayTicket. I stream 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time every single day. If you've got any questions, any clarifications, if you'd like to have a discussion about what I've said during this video, because obviously, like I said, it is a bit polarizing. Some people will disagree on what I said, particularly around defensive ideas. I know that a lot of people love the idea groups. And once again, let me just stress, I don't blame you. It is a really good idea group. I personally just don't like it. It doesn't go with my playstyle or my character. So additionally, if you haven't already, be sure to join the Discord. It is a great place to chill. We host multiplayer sessions every single Friday, and you can just chill with some pretty awesome people. So until then, I hope you guys have enjoyed, and I will see you all next video. Ciao.